4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, I'm getting ready to watch a video.
Really? What?
Oh, just some scary movie.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie? You sick fucks. You've seen one too many, really.
I said, don't you blame the movies! Movies don't create psychos! Movies make psychos more creative!
I can't drink for this podcast. It's too much.
Hello, horror hounds, and welcome to the It Slays podcast. I'm Rowan.
It's Exilia.
And this is Mike.
And it is episode 7.
Slash also 12, really, if you count the bonus. I didn't actually count the bonus episodes, but we've been
it's always
done
bitter
many.
that we don't number the bonus
I'm
episodes.
very bitter, honestly. I want everyone just to be a number now, because I have to keep track of it, and it's quite a feat.
Oh yes, us humanities students trying to do math is not fun.
Also, warning, Mike and I might also be 3 sheets to the wind, so this is going to be quite a loose episode, as Rowan would say.
A loose and fast episode.
They don't call us the Boozers Club for nothing.
That's right. Well, me and Mike call us the Boozers Club, because Exilia doesn't like her name.
Oh no, now the grievances are coming out on the podcast.
The great
Dirty Laundry. This is the Dirty Laundry episode.
Special
like,
edition.
watch what happens live with Anderson Cooper, except it's
This is
watch
us.
what happens on Skype with X-Row and Mike.
Exactly, before recording and after recording. Also, this is us, Monchi Street, after, everybody's left the party, and it's 3 of us just, fucking hammered and just, going on about whatever we talk about. But
yes,
we feel
which
very
is
emotional
the
about
whole,
it.
oh, absolutely, and that's the whole, vibe we're going for anyway, it's like...
This is gonna be the point where historians pick out where the group started to... the fame got to their head.
The fame?
This is when the True Hollywood Story voiceover kicks in.
And then it
slows down, and it's like us in slow-mo, and it's like, and this is when it all went to shit.
So now,
pretty much.
So now I'm going to do a shameless plug. If you don't want to see us break the band up,
What? I didn't know this was getting this serious.
It took a serious turn. Anyway, if you'd like to become a horror hound, join us on Patreon at patreon.com/itslayspodcast and get perks and be cool. And I mean, you're cool if you listen to it and download it anyway, but you get cool things like cards that we've almost mailed.
Okay, guys, I spent so much time making these cards. Handmade cards, trust me. It took me an evening to make the cards. But,
she sacrificed a whole hour and 45 minutes for this.
No, maybe 45 minutes per card. I tried to get a little bit experimental on one of them, and I kind of fucked it up, so I had to, cover it, but that's okay. They're handmade. That's about it's the aesthetic I hope you're hoping for when you signed up for Patreon.
I'm gonna be honest, guys. When you get the cards, let me know. If you think that 45 minutes and they look like that is not a good thing.
Hey, that's mean.
They're very nice.
We will be sending them out tomorrow. They are very... they're okay. Honestly, I can do what I can do. I hope you like them.
So what have you guys been doing? What have you been doing, Mike?
I've been watching films. I've been reading some great books. I've been playing some great video games. I will not lie, I've been wasting too much time playing video games, but we won't go there because that's
Overwatch.
It's Overwatch, yes. And Dead by Daylight, which is horror related. I don't know if anybody knows this game or has ever played it, but it's beautiful because it's this asymmetrical horror game, and you can get it on all the major platforms like consoles and PC. and one person plays the killer, and 4 people play a survivor, and you're put into like a map. And there's all these generators that when you're a survivor that you have to repair, and then it powers the exit gates, which you open up to exit. But the whole time you're trying to do that, there's a killer with like each killer you play has like different powers, and like some of them can like teleport, or like, you know, like one of them is well, actually several of them are from horror movies. So and you try to like evade the killer while also repairing generators and getting out.
Wait, this sounds like the one we watched you on Twitch.
Yeah, that's
you did watch me on Twitch playing it. Yeah. It's my favorite thing to Twitch, and but they do have also licensed killers because they've been like kind of really gaining, I guess, a lot of traction. They have Freddy, they have Leatherface. You got the pig from the Saw movies. You know, when Amanda puts on the pig mask or whatever in like the 3rd or 4th one. Who else? Oh, we just got Ash actually from The Evil Dead. Funny enough, as a survivor, yeah, so that's really cool. And Bruce Campbell did a couple voice lines for him, which was amazing.
When you said licensed killers, I thought you meant like hitmen for some reason.
No, like Michael Myers. Anyway, it's lovely, yeah. And so they just leaked. Someone found a glitch in the game when they put out a new update that showed who the new killer was going to be, and it's going to be Ghostface from Scream, which is really cool. So I'm very excited about that. And anybody who like plays horror games and is into horror movies is definitely going to be excited about that.
Are you still playing this on Twitch?
Oh, I always play it. Do I Twitch it? Not all the time, but I will certainly play it more on Twitch. And if anybody wants to follow me on Twitch, it's at Jacobian Tragedy.
Okay.
Well, the last time I Twitched was last weekend, and it was not planned. I was at a party, and I got horrifically drunk. Now, we're not talking like I was having a good time. We're talking I could barely form a coherent sentence. I was slurring my words. And I came home, and I texted my friend Haley, shout out to Haley, who lives in Prince Edward Island, and she had also been drinking all night, so I knew she was probably still up. And I said, let's get online and play some video games. So we got horrifically drunk at 2 o'clock in the morning, decided to start playing video games together, and Twitched, and it's on my archives, and it's really embarrassing. I rewatched it a couple days later, and it was just 2 of us, like, you know, just playing games and screaming at each other and screaming at the TV and not like barely being able to form a coherent sentence. It was awful, but you know what? It's so fun.
What have you been up to, Exilia? Yeah.
Oh, Jesus, what have I been up to?
Thanks for agreeing to the question before I asked it. You're like, yeah.
Well, Rowan and I went to Detroit, and that was a very interesting experience. Why don't you speak a bit more on that experience, Rowan?
Yeah, it was interesting. I did not enjoy driving in Detroit. It was the bane of my existence.
He literally thought we were going to die every second of the day, the whole time there, and he was just like cursing the whole time.
Yeah, but I mean, the things we did get to see were cool. We put some on the Instagram. So we saw a bunch of like the It Follows locations.
We ate it. Okay, so on It Follows, Jay's sister Kelly and Paul work at Clark's Ice Cream and Yogurt in Berkeley, Michigan, which is in the suburbs. And we went there once, and we're like, oh, we're here. You know, might as well get some ice cream. It was fucking delicious. So we ended up driving there the next day, even though we didn't even go to Detroit the next day, and it was phenomenal. So shout out to Clark's Ice Cream and Yogurt in Berkeley, Michigan. And yeah, it was a very interesting spot. I don't think I was like mentally prepared. I think I'm still processing Detroit a little bit. I don't think I was fully mentally prepared to go there. And then the second day we went to Cleveland and we went to the zoo because
it rocked.
Yeah, the zoo was awesome. We saw gorillas, and a gorilla came up to me. It like came through its like tire hoop and like came up to me and just laid in front of me and picked at its teeth. And it was adorable, obviously. And they had like kangaroos, and the kangaroos aren't really constrained to any area. They just like hop in their grass and do whatever they do, eat it, I guess. And then they hop across a path. Like, I kind of pissed off a kangaroo by accident. because I was taking a picture of it, and then it literally just like bolted in the other direction and hopped all the way like across the lawn, across the path, and then into this like waiting area to go into its house.
You were in its fucking space, man.
Yeah,
you were, like,
I know,
invading its space and like taking a picture and documenting it.
I know.
You were like a colonizer.
I know. Me and Rowan had this conversation about zoos. I know this is so off topic, but hopefully maybe someone will find this interesting. But me and Rowan were having this really big conversation about zoos when we were there. And it's like, you love them because it exposes you to animals you'd never, ever be able to make a connection with in real life when you're living in, like, Canada. And you love them, so you care about them, too. But also, it's like you're taking these wild animals and putting them in this like confined space, and that's like very problematic, obviously. So you have this really like, oh, I know this is like at some level wrong. Also, there's like a lot of conservation efforts, but at some level this is wrong. But then also it's like you're like, I like this.
Oh, it's definitely, a very kind of like ambivalent feeling.
For sure.
For sure, yeah.
So let's get into our movie. Let's bring it to April Fool's Day, 1986. We'll play the trailer for you right now.
Paramount Pictures cordially invites you for a weekend getaway at the party to end all parties.
This is the craziest party that could ever be. Don't turn on the lights, cause I don't want to see.
April Fool.
Welcome to my home and lifestyles of the rich and undeserving. Wrong.
Cheers.
Join 8 privileged guests who are just dying to have fun.
Wow, what is this? The bridal suite? You like it?
The ladies.
I find a use for it.
The gentlemen.
We did on the first date.
The young.
Well, basically, I possess an essential lack of seriousness.
And the restless.
You are such a jerk.
Everyone is having such a good time. It's scary.
Is something wrong?
You look dead.
Radio is blasting. Someone's knocking at the door. I'm looking at my girl. She passed out on the floor. Nikki! I'll see someone in the hall. I've never seen before. Don't know what it is. I don't want to see it.
April Fool's Day. Get ready to party till you drop.
My DVD of it is so old that there are no features on it. I don't even think the trailer is on the DVD. I think that widescreen 16:9 aspect ratio was
like
listed
the
as a
best.
special feature.
Well,
and I'm like, putting it in the aspect ratio that it was filmed in is not a special feature. I'm sorry, but that's how old it is. I bought the DVD of this movie when I was like 14 years old. Like, it was sick.
Sorry, you go ahead, Rowan.
No, I was gonna say I didn't. I was gonna say because I didn't write it down for the facts or anything. But when I was reading about it, this movie, even though there is like footage they've never released, this movie doesn't have a release that has any special features. Like, all the DVDs never had special features. I was reading.
So I'm kind of curious, because, Rowan, I assume this is the first time you've ever seen this.
Yes, it is.
Mike, this is also the first time I've ever seen this. How did you first see this movie? Okay, this sounds really scripted, but it's actually not.
No. So, in our introductory episode, we talked about, spending a lot of time in video stores and going to the, like, horror sections. And this is one of those movies that, when I was a youngster, and of course, as we know by now, I was like 8 years old, and I'd be in movie stores looking at horror movie sections because, I watched my first horror movie when I was in like the 3rd grade, which was probably not appropriate, but anyway. And this was one that the cover of it always struck me, that like artwork of, the girl standing back on with the raising a toast with one hand and hiding a butcher knife behind her back with the other,
This
and
was
her
the cover?
braid in a noose, and she's standing up giving a toast essentially at the head of the table, and it's all the characters of the movie at the table, toasting back to her, and then she's holding a butcher knife behind her back, and her hair is tied into a braid that is a noose.
Oh,
and
interesting.
Right, and it's really cool cover art. And to me, it's sort of iconic. And I, for years, like my whole childhood, I was just fascinated by this. And, I'd turn it over and look at the pictures on the back. And the stills that they put on the back of the VHS were just, they sort of caught my attention and intrigued me. And it was probably a few years into my horror, growth phase, or whatever you want to call it. And I had seen, the first couple Friday the 13th movies, and I realized that my favorite Friday the 13th final girl from number 2, Ginny, played by Amy Steele, was in this movie. So I was like, cool, I've always been intrigued by the cover of this movie. There's this cool actress that I like in it.
Who did she
play?
play?
So I rented it. She played Kit, essentially the final girl.
Oh,
Kit, the blonde.
with the blonde
yes.
hair. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I just, that was like, we rented it at a sleepover one night when we were like, 13 years old or something, and completely fell in love with it. And, it was like not unlike anything that I had ever seen. So, that just sort of intrigued me, and I kind of fell in love with it at a young age, and that was it.
I've only seen the picture that Rowan posted, and it's like, it's her with a butcher knife and there's people at a table. So I definitely didn't see that.
That's like a fan art.
That's like a fan art.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's all I have seen about this movie. Also, I didn't look anything up. Sorry, this is really willy-nilly for me.
No, but that's good. That's good, because you're coming to it fresh. Yeah. I never came to it fresh, so.
So I thought it was really interesting because it's Mike's pick, and Mike has seen it many years ago, and Rowan, this is me and Rowan's first time, and normally it's just my first time because I'm the podcast pleb, and like I never see these movies.
I love that I got to bust your guys' April Fool's Day.
Yeah, well, and I, because I've heard of it, like, I've seen the cover before, like, the cover is very iconic.
And people seem to really like the movie, actually.
I was gonna say, it has a devoted, like, cult following. It's one of those, like, 80s kind of underseen gems that people really latch onto and get attached to.
Yeah, I had just never seen it. It's one of those things when, like, if I was listening to another podcast or I was reading something and, like, I've seen it brought up and I'm always like, oh, like, I gotta see this. And I think, I don't know 100%, but I think I saw the remake, the direct-to-video one.
And then Rowan showed me the remake on the trailer for it, and I was like, ooh, like, doesn't look very good.
And I, in full disclosure, before I was Googling something after I had rewatched it yesterday, and when I went on IMDb, because of course I pull up the IMDb just to, sort of reacquaint myself with all the actors' names and things like that, I was like, holy shit, there's a remake. I had no idea that there was any sequel, remake, anything like that. Like, I thought that this was just it, and that was the end of it, and apparently nothing ever dies. You can't bury a movie and let it rot in peace these days. It's, fucking exhume its corpse and dance it around on strings like goddamn Weekend at Bernie's.
I was just gonna say, like, my main note was, this movie is odd, and nothing is explained.
It's true. There's so
many... Oh, it's a very odd movie, and I think that's why when I watched it as, like, whatever I was, like, 13 years old, it really stuck with me, because it was... The tone was just so off. Like, it's not what you expect. You go in and expect this, like, serious, dreadful, deadly, serious slasher movie, and the whole time it's just like, nothing is, the tension and the atmosphere of it is just not quite right.
Mike, I love you, but I gotta disagree. It was called April Fool's Day. I was expecting some April Fools.
Yes, and it starts off and it gives you April Fools.
But the whole damn thing is April Fools.
Okay, but see, and now, but this is good because it leads to a discussion of, like, exegetic materials.
What does that mean? What is
it's like outside of the text.
Okay,
so
outside of text. Okay.
You're just looking at the movie, right? Whereas, like I said, because my experience with it was the now outmoded video store VHS tape, which, presented you with stills, and you had a cover, and you had a description of the movie, and my first viewings of it were filtered through the expectation that was given to me by the packaging and the marketing.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Right? Whereas you just came into it and watched it. And that's what we do now. We have no expectations. Sometimes we don't even watch, trailers are not even as big a deal as they used to be, except if it's for, a Marvel movie.
Well,
right?
and you have to kind of think of it in the context of this podcast. You picked the movie, and I didn't know anything about it. I've never seen it. I didn't watch the trailer, and I just watched the movie, right? So you have to think about it in terms of that context. That's not, I don't mean that in attack on you or anything like that, but yeah, it's really interesting how we watch the movie because we're watching it for the podcast.
Well, yes, and this is sort of, an issue in terms of any, obviously reading of a piece of art is every person that watches it is bringing, whatever baggage they have and expectations. Your expectations and your, fucking psychological baggage and shit is completely different from mine coming into it. So,
exactly. That's why I actually, love doing this podcast, because it's so, it kind of, gets to that a lot. Because most of the time, I've never seen the movie a lot of the time.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, let's face it, as humanities students, we sort of are more cognizant of this maybe than a lot of people, but obviously every time you read a piece of art, whether it's a song or a book or a poem or a movie or a painting or a graffiti or whatever, it's just the fucking completely subjective nature of it, there's no objective way, and critics flame me alive, whatever. There's literally no objective way to read a piece of art.
You can.
Even if you study literature and you do close readings and stuff like that, where they kind of teach you to pick apart and you're parsing sentences and stuff, even that, you're bringing your own sort of psychological viewpoint to it.
Mm-hmm.
Even parsing a sentence to me is a socio-political act, and it's very personal.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Because it can be anything to anybody, no matter it's based on your perspective, right? Your worldview.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a feature on IMDb that I'm not gonna lie, I've been using it since I was 14 or 15 years old. Back when it was just nobody knew what it was.
Honestly, guys, I just have to tell you, Mike is the human IMDb, and that's how I've known him for 7 years, as the human IMDb.
Yeah, I've been called that more than once. I'm not that good, but it's for random weird shit.
You're pretty good, because you're saying all these names. I'm I have no fucking clue.
And honestly, I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes when I get together with other kind of geeky people, of our ilk, our people, our brethren, our sistren, our everything in, and they're oh, and it's some random, character actor, and I'm honestly, I don't know who that is. I know their face, but I mostly know the actresses. It's if it's the women, I don't know any of the dudes. I know the actresses. And
don't even go to the website, guys. Message Mike, because he knows.
Yeah, absolutely. I from being 10 years old and becoming a feminist because of slasher movies. It was I'm always fuck the dudes. It's all about the women.
I love that story. I just I love that's how you became a feminist. And I know you talked about it.
Oh my god, yes.
Episode too,
yeah.
I love that's just how.
Well, I mean, it's there's lots of complaints in terms of academia and shit about film studies and slasher movies and stuff like that. And I feel maybe it's outdated to say that a lot of feminist film critics think that slasher movies are misogynist, because slasher movies are still now sort of a relic of the 80s and then that burst in the 90s. But I don't know, that's a really simplistic way of looking at it, and for a youngster, like myself, who obviously was watching movies like this before perhaps they should have been intellectually, but I didn't have the capacity to, like, absorb anything intellectually from these movies. All I got was, like, the women always fucking came out on top and were smart and kicked the dudes' asses. So, to me, that sort of turned me into a feminist. And then when people were like, oh, girls can't do this or that, I'm like, fuck you, girls can, like, kill Jason, Like,
yeah. Yeah, for sure. No, I think that's really interesting. And I think, I know we always talk about academia because that's where we're in, and somehow that becomes, like, that's our reality, so we end up talking about it. But just because a lot of academics say, like, oh, like, horror films do this or that, not everybody gets that out of something. Like, we all have different worldviews, and we're all going to get something kind of, of course, culturally different, like the same, but we're going to get something different about it. And you became a feminist because of this. And so many academics would say, like, slasher films are problematic, but that, like, helped you.
Yes, and I get from a, like, adult intellectual perspective how that argument is valid. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, if you divorce your intellectual arguments from sort of concrete material reality, which is a youngster watching this movie and actually taking something from it.
Yeah.
Like somebody who doesn't have the intellectual capacity and just sees something and sort of, and again, that same argument that I'm making can be turned on its head, in that, like, you're watching somebody kill people or whatever, but, like, if it's a youngster, and especially, and now here's the thing, it's, and this is the twist of it, it's, especially if you're, like, a youngster who is, like, on the outside, and not, you know what I mean? Like, if you're a youngster on the margins for whatever reason, and, you're, like, othered, or, and then, to me, that's when you really identify more with, like, the final girl, even though you're, like, a young boy. You know what I mean? Like, you identify with them for whatever reason. You might not understand it. You don't know why you identify with them, or like them so much, or feel attached to them. But, like, to me, that's the sort of material reality that, like, criticism really can't touch.
For sure.
and it's not, it's just, you know what I mean? Like, it's beyond this, like, abstract theorizing.
No, for sure. Because, quite frankly, when academics think about things, they think about things in their own lens, like how they've experienced life. And if I hate and love academia, and a lot of people who do academia, though, are, come from a privileged position. They really do. And they've only really seen a privileged vision of the world, and they see a very able-bodied vision of the world, and someone who's, their age when they're doing their research or whatever. So, their 20s or 30s or whatever. And they're thinking of people and thinking they think how they think. But they don't. They kind of ignore the people who are younger and read it, or people who are not as, like, educated and read it. They only think about themselves, really, when they think about how it's being read, but they don't really have any grasp of how anybody else reads it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's not to make any sort of, like, because you don't want to slide down that slope of it's elitist or anything like that. But, I mean,
for sure.
Obviously there's a place for, like, a rigorous intellectual discussion or critique of any idea or piece of art, and there's also a place for, more like the material, layperson's
it's
interpretation.
Always in sociology, it's always theory versus praxis.
Exactly. Yeah. And theory is the more academic side, and practice is the material reality.
It's like the more practical, everyday live thing. And I certainly don't want to get into the elitist blah 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 bullshit, because I find that always tends to come to, like, I'm not trying to get political here, but it always comes to, like, this right wing thing, and that's really not what it's about.
So we're not going to go there. Yeah.
Certainly not in that realm, but I have lived in academia, and so have you, and we understand the workings of it, and some people in academia are privileged and study about things that they
and you can love something and critique it.
Exactly.
That's what it comes down to. You can be a part of something. You can acknowledge that it's formative, but also be critical of it.
Exactly.
And that's what obviously everybody should be doing about everything.
About everything. Exactly. Yeah. There's so many wonderful things that come out of academia, but nothing is perfect, and you certainly have to critique everything in the world, really.
I'm going to take my Wonder Woman Golden Lasso, and I'm going to rein it back in, and go back to the IMDb.
Yes.
where we started this, very boisterous discussion. And the point I was making was that I've been on IMDb for a very long time. It's something that, as a film lover, both, quote unquote, like film with a capital F and films as in trash and garbage and like TV movies and all that shit and like shit student films and all that. Like, IMDb has always been something that has been very useful to me, and ever since I sort of like hit my formative years in my teens, it's been something that is very central to my like cultural consumption. But despite all this, and I'm sure this is something that has been on there probably since like the late 90s or early thousands, there is a segment of IMDb, and I'm sure every movie has it, and it's this is again going to sound ridiculous. I didn't know this was a thing, but it's plot keywords.
Oh, that's interesting.
And to be honest, this is something that I've always sort of noticed in the features of IMDb.
This is on IMDb,
but never actually clicked on it. Oh. And for some bizarre reason today, I was sitting down on my laptop and I was writing notes in my notebook, and I saw that and I clicked on it, and it just opened up a whole new world for me. So here's the thing.
I've never heard of it either.
So there are plot keywords for every movie on IMDb, and I will tell you right now, in case you were curious, they are user submitted, and they are spectacular.
Okay, so tell me more.
We are witnessing. This is Botticelli's Birth of Venus. But it's birth of a new feature on our podcast.
Amazing.
And it is Mike doing IMDb plot keywords.
Yes.
So
okay, tell me more. I've never seen this.
Oh, yes, please. I got you covered. So, for April Fool's Day 1986, we have 111 plot keywords user submitted.
What?
I'm not going to list them all out, but I'm just going to kind of cherry pick and dance through the user submitted plot keywords and phrases that apply to this movie.
Everybody can add a keyword.
Yeah, it's so. Wow. And I mean, and it's kind of a cool idea.
I'm so excited.
If there's an element of this movie that is not that's kind of random or whatever, but that might tie it to another movie that you want to watch of the same thing, like if it's like satanic worship or whatever, and you want to find all the movies about satanic worship,
is this
you
kind
can
of
click
like
on
a hashtag thing in the way that like
it's sort of, and yes, and that's sort of where I was going. It's like it was a proto hashtag, because I feel like it's probably been there for like 15 or 20 years, and I just haven't realized it. So this was like a proto hashtag. So we've got plot keywords.
I love it.
You've got your ones that you expect, like prank, college student, teenager, and I'm like, actually, there's nobody in this that's a teenager, so that's because they very clearly state that they're in their early 20s and they're in seniors in college. So anyway, and then you've got like teenage boy, teenage girl, which is again not even accurate, but okay, so you're saying that there's two genders in this movie. Okay, fine. So let's move down. Let's move into the more specific and sometimes esoteric plot keywords that have been user submitted. 20-something. Fair enough. 20-year-old. Characters murdered one by one. Okay, cool. I'll give it to you. Supernatural power. Nope. Not even relevant to this movie at all.
What?
But now let's get into the specifics. Collapsing chair.
What?
Spraying water on someone.
Oh my god. Shout out to the people that are putting these keywords on IMDb.
No, listen here, sweetheart. Just wait. They're doing God's work. Male unzips his zipper.
Oh my god. Who becomes
Friendship. No. Like just literally every movie that ever existed.
So
Motorboat, which is not the motorboat that I immediately think of, but an actual motorboat. Giving a toast.
Oh my god.
Eating. Letter.
What? What was
Ex-junkie. Crying baby. Abortion.
Crying
doll.
baby? Oh
photograph.
God. What? These are
apology. Oh, hang on now, but they're generic. 3-word title.
What?
Breaking the fourth wall by winking.
Oh my god.
Severed penis. Male underwear. Bare-chested male. Whoopee cushion. Soccer. Again, not even relevant to this movie. Hot dog. There's no hot dog in this movie. I'm sorry.
Oh, they are playing soccer out in the field.
Oh, but was that soccer? I don't know what that was. It was some kind
so
of weird...
They were like kicking a ball of some sort.
Punctuation in title. Boat dock. Apostrophe in title.
Oh my god.
Female in a swimsuit. Rich kid. Booby trap. Hanged boy. Fake hanging. Castration. Surprise ending, which of course is actually relevant.
Do they
Just
think the hanging
sex.
is gonna be real, not fake?
These are our IMDb keywords for April Fool's Day.
Shout out
everybody.
to all the people that came up with the most obscure generic
to all the
parts of this
people
movie
who
and put them on IMDb.
Registered for an IMDb account and spent, I'm sure, hours of several days composing 1 to 4 word keywords and phrases.
You know these people didn't just do it for April Fool's Day, though.
Oh, they
you
didn't.
know they
no,
do
and
it
that's
for
what I'm
every
saying.
horror
That's what I'm
movie
saying.
they've
They
seen.
spent days,
Shout
sitting
out
in that
to
computer
you.
chair, like, thank you for making sure that I could find this movie in the sea of ones that have severed penis,
and collapsible
severed
chair.
head, and
comma
collapsible
in
chair.
and
And,
name.
Uh,
The collapsing chair, though.
20-year-old.
I mean, yeah. Those people, good for you.
And
I
to be
wonder how
fair,
many films
there are
they
probably not a lot. I'm sure, like, the percentage of movies with collapsible chairs is probably in the like
Pretty low.
2 to 4% range.
Of movies
At
ever
best.
created in human
Yes,
history.
of every movie ever created that has a collapsible chair. Not even 2. I'd say it's like 1.7 to 2.1%.
Oh my god. Okay.
Yes. So anyway, that's my new feature, and if you guys go on IMDb before we record the next movies, I will murder you.
That is so funny.
This movie was definitely one of the oddest movies I've ever seen.
It was definitely one of the oddest movies I've ever seen. I feel like Mike's gonna be so sad.
I
don't give a shit.
To me, it was just like, it was interesting because, like, I'm thrown into this world. The context of people's, like, personalities is never explained.
No, it doesn't make any sense.
I don't know when they're, like, joking or not joking.
I know.
And it's just, like, and also, like, yeah, it's just odd is the word, because everyone's, like, a little off. Like, there's something not right, I find, about, like, everybody.
Okay, full disclosure, I fell asleep. We were supposed to watch it on Tuesday. We watched 40 minutes of it and I fell asleep. That might have not been the movie's fault. It might have been my fault. Wednesday, I watched the same 40 minutes of it and I fall asleep. Also, might have been my fault. So today, Rowan's like, oh my god, we gotta watch this movie. So we watch it. Okay, the first 10 minutes or 5 minutes when they're like, I'm Mary O'Reilly
O'Shea O'Hara.
I'm just like, whoa, most like stereotypical Irish thing ever, first of all.
That's what's so funny about it. That's what's so funny
I know,
about
but
it.
then I'm like, I for real forgot who.
Because she's Irish and she's like, I'm going to convent school.
Yeah, and she's like, and
I'm an Irish
like,
nun.
rough sex or whatever she says. But like, I'm just like, so the whole movie, I'm like, who the fuck's Mary O'Shea O'Reilly O'Toole? Who the fuck is this person? And why did they say this? Like, I'm so confused.
Her name is Nikki.
I watch it 3 times before I ask Rowan, and Rowan's like, I'm like, who is this Mary O'Shea O'Reilly O'Toole, and why does she have the most stereotypical Irish name ever? And then he's like, oh, I think it's that girl in the
It's
in,
a
like,
joke.
The bathing suit.
It's a joke.
Why did they do that? I'm so confused. And as we've addressed in prior episodes, I'm very concerned with the logic behind movies, and I actually didn't realize that I was concerned with logic so much until I started doing this podcast. But I'm like, why did they do that? What's the point of it?
It's this thing called character development. And I will say, and it's one of my notes from like halfway down the page, but I guess I'll start off because I feel like to me this is the most important element of this whole movie.
Okay, thank you.
It's why I fell in love with it, and it's why
Mike,
to this day
I'm so glad you're here to be my guardian.
Okay, I will be your guardian, and I will guide. I will be your lighthouse. Like, to me, the single greatest thing about this movie, and I know it's, you know, it's not a quote-unquote great movie. Like, I know that. I know it's got plot holes. I know that there's a lot of problems you can have with it. But, like, again, I watched it when I was young, and it endeared itself to me, not particularly because of its plot, which was really cool and unusual for the time. It was very, like, ahead of the game in terms of, like, being, like, self-referential and, like, knowing what horror movies were doing. But it was because, like, the actors, even if you couldn't understand what was happening between them, everyone was so natural, and they were all so charismatic, and you know, it didn't seem like you were watching a bunch of actors. Like, to me, I was watching it, and it wasn't like, oh, this is the stock character, and you know, like, to me, they were real people, and they were just having fun, and like, I watched it, and I was like, oh my god, these people are like so cool, you know, like when I was a youngster, like, you know, they get along really well, and they like banter, and you know, to me, they had so much like charisma, and yeah, and they seemed like real people, and they just had like way more charisma and magnetism than I think. I mean, this is '86. This is literally like the middle of the '80s, like, you know, when slasher movies are at their boom, and everybody's putting them out, and it's all just like the worst actors you could imagine, and you know, even the big money making slasher movies and stuff, the characters and actors in them were, you know, awful at best.
The
you know?
only person I really found uncharismatic was Nan. She was like such a wet blanket.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing, and she is the wet blanket. So it's like funny
such a
that,
personality.
Like, yeah, like her personality was, and to me that was realistic, because we all know people that are wet blankets and have no fucking personalities, right? Like,
I feel like every group. This may sound really stereotypical. Oh my fuck, stereotypical. But every group, I feel like, kind of in some way or another, kind of like, I hate cliches and I hate stereotypes and all that, but like at some point there is a balance in every friend group, and I feel like there's like lots of different personalities in friend groups. I feel like there always has to be a friend, like some friend in the friend group that's kind of like the voice of reason, and I feel like Nam was the voice of reason.
Yeah, she was definitely the wet blanket. She was, you know, the one who was not going to drink too much and not going to have too much fun. And
I'm not going to say who that was in our friend group, but yes, that's like realistic.
And like, to me, like, that's what endeared me to it all these years.
It's like the realness of their personalities.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, like, now, obviously, 20 years after 20 years after I first saw it, you know, a part of my fondness for it is nostalgia, obviously. But a large part of it is because, you know, even at like 14 years old, I had watched a lot of horror movies. I would go to the movie store every single weekend and rent, you know, 5 or 6 of them, and we'd have sleepovers and just like watch horror movies all night. And I would never remember any of their names, with very few exceptions. You know, like, none of the characters would really stick out to me, but this was one of the first movies I think I ever saw where, like, a slasher movie, where after I watched it, I could remember the characters. and, you know, like, their personalities and the actors, and, you know, like, to me, that was such a huge difference. Like, they were really charismatic, as opposed to a lot of the cardboard people at the time. Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, obviously, from 1986 to 2019, you have a huge leap, and, you know, there's been a lot of movies since then where, you know, like, obviously they take more care with the casting and the writing of characters and stuff, but, like, you know, in 86, this was as charismatic as you could ask for, really.
So, did you see this at Blockbuster or at another, like, video place?
I rented this at East Coast Video.
Because I've literally, like, as a child, my dad used to take me to Blockbuster, and he would always, like, take his time to find the video he wanted, and I would, like, as we kind of talked about in the introduction episode, I would always just stare at the covers. And it's kind of like a book. Like, you don't want to judge a cover by its book, but, I mean, by its cover. I mean, judge a book by its cover. You never want to judge a book by its cover, but for real, you judge a book by its cover. Let's be honest here.
Oh, absolutely. I'm very vocal and firm supporter of judging a book by its cover, and
quite honestly,
if you're gonna throw thousands of dollars behind, and I know that's, you know, like, even for an independent, like, small publisher, you're throwing thousands and thousands of dollars behind a book cover design.
Yes, for sure.
Like, if you care about the book, it's very important, and like, I will pick up books and look at them that I never would otherwise because they had
a
some
good
kind
cover,
of, like, riveting cover. Yeah.
Yes, you know, Martha, she has the exact same philosophy. If they think it's a good enough book to sell, they're gonna pay money to have a good cover.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the movie. And I used to go back and forth through those aisles looking at the covers. Because, quite frankly, my dad might have let me pick one movie ever so often. And if I was going to pick that movie, it was going to be a damn good movie. Because I knew I wasn't going to get it all the time. And I had never seen this movie. I had never seen this movie at Blockbuster.
Yeah, I feel like it wasn't a real, like, Blockbuster pick. Again, I feel like it didn't, you know, make a big splash, and it probably didn't make a whole lot of money, but I feel like even at the time, in, like, the late 80s and, like, early 90s and then late 90s, it was more of, like, a cult pick, because we actually didn't have, when I was growing up, I was probably in maybe junior high before the first Blockbuster opened up in my town, and before then, it was all, we had, like, you know,
local
3 or 4, it was, like, local, if not Newfoundland-based companies, like Atlantic Canada. Like, I feel like East Coast Video maybe had 3 or 4 locations, like, across.
Locations.
Yeah, like maybe in Nova Scotia and stuff. But, you know, it was that was very much independent, and, you know, you'd go in there, and it was very much like a vibe suited to the town.
Yes.
And they had a very specific and odd selection, and they had a lot of random things, and, you know, I'd go in there and find these fucking insane, like, random, like, 3 on a Meat Hook is one that I rented,
yeah, I remember that from the intro.
Yeah, we won't even go there, like, but, you know, like, things that you would never, like, maybe obscure and, like, grindhousey stuff and exploitation that you will not ever find anywhere ever again. And then that same building.
It's because those movies were about as high budget as the movie places you went to.
Well, I mean, but you'd go in there and the shelf would just be blocked. Every shelf is blocked with titles, right? And so it was a matter of, like, just going in there and just spending hours looking through, like, reading the backs of them, looking at the stills, like, what sounds good. And then it was just funny that we're bringing up East Coast, because that building got bought out when Blockbuster came to town. They bought out that building, and I guess the company, and then reopened it as a Blockbuster. And the selection went from, you know, I mean, I'm just throwing out random numbers now, but, like, say you went from having 10,000 movies crammed onto every shelf everywhere in the store, to, like, 3,000 or 4,000, because it was all faced out. You'd have one copy faced out, and it was just such a different
it was
experience.
More mainstream. Yeah, like,
it was very mainstream, yes. And then all of those, like, bizarre, obscure movies that, like, had probably been out of print since the mid-'80s,
Yeah.
disappeared because they didn't keep the selection. They were like, nope, we're gonna feature whatever brand new title there is. And back in the day, you couldn't go on Netflix and watch it, so you had to have 500 copies of Speed or whatever, and have like a whole
because everybody
wall
had
full
to
of
get it. All the people in town had to buy it at the same time,
Yeah.
or rent it at the same time. It's really interesting that you're talking about this, and I know this is like a side note from the movie as well, but we had
I think
what
that's
was it
the
called?
name of the episode.
I was gonna say we will have to say this episode is not actually about April Fool's Day. It's about consumption of videos. Yeah. So anyway, you go ahead.
What was it called? 10 to 10 video in Kenful, which was right beside the IGA at the time, and they had movies and they had porn in the back, and it was a real video store. It was a real video store before Blockbuster, to be quite honest, because so many people, and I'm realizing this, there's actually one Blockbuster store left, and it's in Oregon.
I always love to be honest.
Honest? What do you mean?
Well, you were saying a word and then you said honest and you said
oh,
honest.
Sorry.
Honest.
I want to be honest. Sorry. There was life before Blockbuster. Blockbuster is a huge fucking corporation that kind of
it swallowed up any
stores.
Individuality. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. And we always talk about our nostalgia for Blockbuster, but quite frankly, there was life before Blockbuster that I comprehend in my comprehends and Rowan comprehends. And Blockbuster is really the corporatization of movies. But anyways, I'm not gonna get into that because that's
but it's funny that you bring that up though, and we're this is gonna be the episode where officially we sort of get away from the movie. This might be the theory episode.
The theory episode.
But
yeah,
when you think about it, and I think a good example of this is the recent release of Captain Marvel, which was awesome and we loved it, made shit tons of money and loved Brie Larson and all that. But there's such a great moment in it, because it takes place in the 90s and she comes back to Earth and falls into a blockbuster, and it's the whole it's essentially a scene designed to prick that nostalgia in people who are in their late 20s or older and get a laugh. And I remember me and my best friend went to it with his son who was 10, and we actually
I'm sorry, I can't believe he's 10 now.
Oh, he's 10 years old. He's 10 years old. And we actually had to say to him during the movie, both of us slightly separately said oh, this is why that's so funny, and explain to him during the movie what a video store was.
Yeah.
And it was funny, and part of that is because obviously it really digs at the nostalgia of everybody who went to a video store in their teen and tween years. And that was good, and that was funny, and you realize that they were kind of digging at nostalgia. But anybody who was really into movies and is maybe even a couple years older than that, like you said, realizes that there was life before Blockbuster, because Blockbuster's actually, when you look at it, Blockbuster is kind of what killed video consumption. I know they're all oh, Netflix came and streaming and downloading and pirating.
Yeah.
And yes, obviously all of that stuff changed the way that we consume films
media.
And TV and media. But Blockbuster really busted down that door in terms of giving you a selection. And again, anybody who is of a certain age knows, Blockbuster would not carry movies that were unrated or that were rated NC-17 or anything like that. And a lot of horror movies were unrated, or they were NC-17 because of and it was stupid. And again, there are movies you can watch, there are documentaries that talk about how the rating system, literally 2 second cut in a movie could make the difference between it being R and unrated. Exactly. And it was very arbitrary depending on who was rating it. But it was this mesh of cultural agencies that essentially decided what you could and couldn't have access to.
For sure.
Whereas we had, before the Blockbuster swallowed up that beautiful independent video store that we had in our small city, like I said, I could go there. I could get 3 on a meat hook. I could get Girly. I could get April Fool's Day. I could get Puppet Master, Friday 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, whatever I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
But I had all, and then I'd go there, and like the people there knew their movies. They didn't give a fuck.
They liked movies. They liked
exactly.
them a lot.
But then,
they loved them.
Blockbuster came, and the selection like literally just turned nothing. And like to me, okay, yes, the new forms of media did alter the way that we consumed our TV shows and our movies, but Blockbusters kind of like hideously, and it's not just the capitalist aspect of it, but it's also the pandering to, let's face it, they were like pandering to middle American, like quote unquote family values. They're like, we're a family store, we're not carrying anything that's unrated. And that was essentially really like the death knell of having a true selection. Like they were not catering to movie fans. They did not give a fuck about film. They did not give a fuck about fans of movies in general. They wanted families to come in and rent the big new release and buy a bag of popcorn.
That's the thing that I find so interesting, because, like, I mean, we've fallen into this trap on this podcast talking about the nostalgia of Blockbuster. And I think it's interesting because Blockbuster is something, it's a big company. And like I said, it's very much the Walmart of movies.
Well,
so
I mean, they have it in their name, Blockbuster. They don't give a fuck about indies. They're Blockbuster.
Well,
like it's literally in their fucking
it's
name.
It's about Blockbusters. So someone who's listening in Florida, someone who's listening in fucking Oregon or California or wherever, England. Like, I don't know how far Blockbuster's reach was, but it's a corporate entity. So Blockbuster, it's like I said, it's like Walmart. So yeah, we're gonna all have this this experience of going to Blockbuster, the store, but really that's exactly it. It kind of died when Blockbuster actually became a thing, because that's exactly it. Blockbuster didn't want to carry indie stuff. Blockbuster carried things that were marketable, and it killed like 10 to 10 Video or Candyland Video or Allen's Video in St. John's, although that, I must admit, had been going well into the time Rowan and I lived there, which was like, I mean, it might have shut down in 2012, 2013.
I worship Allen's Video.
Allen's Video, like, man, they like stayed alive. And actually, I, as a joke, sent Rowan a job ad because we're moving back to Nova Scotia. And I sent him a job ad to this place in Berwick, Nova Scotia, which is very rural, but they're hiring somebody for 8 hours a week to work at a video store. And this is a local video store. It's not a Blockbuster. And I just, that is the true, independent thing. Because they're going to have shit that they're going to carry. And they're not going to care, really, if they make money off of it, like Blockbuster did. The fucking jean jacket?
That's not a segue.
That is Slash a Doily.
Okay, oh my god! Okay, so yes. Okay, segue. So, after she goes into Mary O'Reilly O'Shea O'Toole, literally the first note I have written in my notebook about this movie is, Nikki, is she wearing a doily?
Okay.
This bitch is wearing a goddamn human-sized doily with a massive jean jacket underneath.
Okay, so to rein this in a little bit, let's at least talk about the movie for 10 minutes. So I figure let's talk about, what the points we liked, we didn't like about the movie, our overall feelings without rating about it.
Okay, I have a thing I really liked about it. I really liked when they were in the room and they had the picture with the cat clock behind it. And then they took the picture off and it was just the cat clock moving its eyes.
That was like high culture meets low culture.
I love that. There's something about that. In Greenwood, there's a whole store that has cat clocks, and I just like wanted a cat clock. So I just like really love that part.
Okay, so that was a cutting analysis of this movie. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Honestly, one of those cat clocks, I looked at the price and it was like $80 a cat clock. And I was very envious when I saw this movie because I was like, they paid damn well $80 for their cat clock. And I wanted it.
I mean, the cat clock certainly, didn't really fit into the decor of the, country manor.
Because honestly, when they came in, they're like, oh, it's so beautiful, which is great because honestly, the landscape was quite gorgeous, actually. It didn't really look like, they didn't really specify where it should be, but I'm assuming the States from their accent and just from like general knowledge of where movies are generally sent. This place looked like it was freaking Thailand with the goddamn scenery. It's beautiful, right? I've been to most of the States and like, it looked like it was Thailand. Let's be honest. It didn't look anywhere in the States. So they go...
I'm pretty sure it was filmed in, like, BC or something.
Yeah, not even... Like,
I'm pretty sure that was a Canadian island they filmed on.
Well, this is the thing. Like, I've been to most of the States before, besides, like, Kansas. And I feel like nowhere there is, like, looks like that. And, it didn't look like anywhere I've ever seen. So anyways, they come up to this place and it's actually quite beautiful scenically. And they go to this house. So they were like, oh, this is such a beautiful location. Such a beautiful home. But it's like very obvious in 2019, almost through 2020, that this home is set in the 80s, right? Because you look at it and it's very heavy wood everywhere. Besides the size, I really wouldn't be that impressed because it just looks like this home from the 80s.
Okay, so here are my thoughts on I did actually have notes on the sort of the clashing decor themes that happen on the island. I said, when they show up, of course, Nikki, aka Mary O'Shea O'Toole.
Okay, is that who it is?
Yes. She goes, oh, gross, or something like that. Because, they pull up to the island and all they can see is trees. But, once they get off the dock, then it opens up and it's this beautiful, house, and, you got your dock and the smaller houses that surround it and stuff like that. Yeah, so they get on this island, and they have this immediate, like, all they see is trees, and, like, it looks kind of wild, but then they break out and realize, oh my god, it's this fucking gorgeous, and to call it a country manor is really, doing it a disservice, because it's
like an estate.
It's a mansion, it's an estate, it's got, like, the kind of satellite buildings, like a guest house, I guess, and, wells, and, boathouses, and things like that. But then, once you get inside and we've got the really lavish like dining room and living area and the area overlooking, they pull open the curtain and realize that they have this beautiful view of like the rest of the island and the water, and it's actually gorgeous. And you mentioned the wood paneling, which I actually find it is very mid 80s, but it's mid 80s let's call it mid 80s bourgeois. Like this was wood paneling of people who had money, right? So you get there and your initial, this is all you see and it's beautiful, but then I find the jarring thing about the decor of the house in this movie is that once you move into like the kitchen or the bedrooms, it looks hideously cheap and it looks like the guest room out of somebody's cabin in the woods, which is sort of technically, even though Muffy obviously has money, and this is, a mansion, let's face it, all of their money went into, how do you say, sort of the performance of it all. Mm-hmm. Like, you get in and your entertaining rooms, your dining room, your living room, your communal areas, and then you go outside and they have, the area cleared out where there's like a net so people can play volleyball or soccer. Yeah. And then, there's a moment when Nan, after Nan listens to the recording of the child screaming, and she's sitting outside, and it's this beautiful, like, ornate section cut out of the island where, you know, there's like willow trees and shit hanging over it, and she sits down on this beautiful stone bench with a, you know, this like gorgeous statue behind it of like the Buddha, you know, and it's very like nouveau riche, like, welcome to our island, you know, here's our signifiers of our wealth. But then when they go into the bedrooms, it's like, it's just these hideous white and beige walls, and really the wood paneling in the rest of the house is like very dark and rich. You know what I mean? Like, it's very like oaky and like expensive wood, but then once you get into the bedrooms, it's very like cheap, shitty, like kind of beige and yellow wood, so it looks like something that would have actually came out of your parents' or your grandparents' cabins or homes, you know, like in the mid-80s. And I kind of like that jarring, you know, to me it sort of spoke to like you know, that kind of capitalist, like, they're nouveau riche, so they're putting on, like, they've got the outside of the mansion done up so that it looks, you know, very imposing. Yeah. And the landscaping is beautiful, and that's, like, everything about the outside on the island, other than when they first pull up to it, is absolutely gorgeous. Like, they've clearly pumped all of their money however they make it, because, of course, it's never called out specifically where, you know, Muffy's, the St. John's money comes from. But, you know, it is all very much about the appearance, and I just find it so interesting that, like, once they get into the bedrooms, which is, you know, when you're taking off your clothes, you're revealing, you're pulling off your mask, essentially, it's like, that's when they drop the facade of, you know, oh, this is, you know, this very, well-off, we're very rich, kind of atmosphere, and it's like, oh, here's your like semi-comfortable bed that you could get at Value Village for $20.
They were terrible beds.
They were horrific beds, and I got uncomfortable just watching it. I can't imagine having to sleep on them. I'm sure the mattresses would just be jabbing up into your back.
Yeah, I would think. I did not think they looked good.
Okay, so what I really thought about the rooms were, like, it was really interesting because it was, like, very true to the, like, April prank kind of thing. Everything, like, those chairs that fell backwards, that once they fell backwards, they ended up, like, turning upright, and the people fell off the chairs. I was like, this is such, like, this is a movie that, like, takes April Fool's kind of to the nth degree, I feel. Like, it really follows through with the whole April Fool's theme, because I feel like April Fool's is, like, in our culture, maybe, I don't know, maybe this is just my perspective and how I see it, but as I age, I feel like April Fool's becomes, like, less potent as, like, I don't know if I call it a holiday, but as like a day, like it's certainly in our culture, like a specific day. And I feel like it becomes less potent because people kind of like have abused it a bit much, but I feel like it becomes like, just like, it's really like April Fool's. Everything about this whole movie is like April Fool's. And I just find that, I don't know if it's like our culture at the current time, because I'm like, oh, maybe that's a bit cliche, or like at the time, I think they might have taken April Fool's a bit more seriously than we do these days. But like, kudos to them for really following through on the April Fool's theme. But no, in terms of like, I thought in terms of the bedrooms, like I thought it was really interesting, but then like one person gets like S&M stuff, and the other person gets this like fucking video recorder of like a baby's crying. The first 40 minutes they have like, you know, in the scenes she has a baby crying in her room and she's quite pissed off about it, and I was really confused because Mike, what was her kill scene?
The girl with the babies crying?
Yeah, Nan.
They didn't actually show Nan.
I don't think they showed it.
She wandered off, I think.
Yeah, because she was looking for Muffy.
Yeah,
she was looking for Muffy.
But then they never showed anything specific.
Because she was looking for Muffy. She was looking for Muffy, and then...
Because Muffy probably off-screen explained to her Instead of doing a fake kill, probably explain to her, like, I'm sorry, this is what I'm doing, let's keep you in the guest house or whatever. Until you have to jump in the well and pretend to be dead.
I guess this was kind of confusing to me because you have the two people that come to the well to get the water. First of all, that water looks fucking disgusting. So anybody who's gonna get water there to drink, like, I'm sorry for you. And then they're like, oh, maybe one of us needs to walk down because for some reason the rope doesn't work. They walk down, they have their friend Skip in there, they have their friend Art in there, and then they have this other random body. And the whole time I'm like, who the fuck is this person? Who is this other person? And then I found out who it's Nan, but I didn't realize it was Nan because the only thing you had seen of her was that she saw Muffy walk, and at this point Muffy was acting kind of strange. She saw her walk, so she like ran down the stairs, the most like just urgent run I've ever seen, and then runs into this beautiful like garden area, and then that's the last thing you see of her.
Yes, but to be fair, at this point you hadn't actually seen anybody get murdered.
Well,
right?
You kind of seen Skip get murdered.
Yes, but they didn't discover his body. They didn't discover his body yet at this point.
Hadn't they? Oh, yeah. They find him on the dock after that.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Side note, the dock.
This whole episode is a side note.
They're making out in the boathouse, right?
Yes, yeah.
They're making out in the boathouse. And his, like, corpse keeps, like, rotating, and they keep seeing it, like, come towards them 3 times, because in my mind they're seeing him flow down, and they're seeing that 3 times. In my mind, that's how they see it.
No, because the camera shows it, and the camera just shows him floating underneath.
Yeah, and in my mind, it shows him floating underneath 3 times. But then they run to the place with all the rest of their friends. They're like, oh my god, had anyone seen Skip since yesterday? And then they are like, blah, blah, blah. I haven't realized that they have. And one person's like, oh, like kind of didn't say it, but realized they hadn't seen him since yesterday. And they're like, well, he's fucking dead down there. Let's go try to find him. And it's like, you just saw his body. But they go into a goddamn forest with a snake to look for him.
Yeah, they thought it was a prank, and that's why they asked if anyone saw Skip, because they thought it was a fake body. They thought.
But wouldn't you, if you had seen a fake body, that's the first place you would investigate?
Well, they can't get to it. It was underneath.
Wouldn't you go back to the boathouse and look underneath?
Well, they went to ask their friend.
But they went to a jungle.
No, that didn't happen.
They went to the forest, and then they asked their friends, and then they went to a forest, and then there was a snake that was attacking Art, and then he got killed.
Yeah. I mean,
yes, there was a snake. There definitely was a snake.
That's what happened. They said, blah, 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 and then the people were like, oh, these are these virgin people coming back and yelling at us. And then they said, has anybody seen Art? Or no, so has anybody seen Skip since last night? And then people were like, didn't really say anything. And Art was like standing up, and he seemed like he had said something. And then he went, like the 3 of them went to look. And then none of them went back to the beach house where they had originally seen the person. They all went to different places. And then Art went to the fucking forest. And then he got gobbled up by a trap and then attacked by a snake 2 times. Anyways, they're in the room, and the guy, okay, I think it's kind of funny how he like turns on the light and then he turns it off, and then it turns on a different light, and then he turns that light off and then it turns on another light. I actually think that's kind of funny.
Yes, that prank is quite funny.
It actually is pretty funny.
As pranks go.
Yeah, as pranks go. Also, I must say, like, I can't honestly, one thing about this movie is I really found it hard to remember the people's names. Now that you say it, the person was named Nikki, and I can't really actually remember the guy's name, but they were having sex in the room, and then the art guy walked in, and, like, they were having sex in the weirdest way that I've ever seen anybody be flexible before.
Oh, yeah, that was clearly hysterical because like you couldn't even tell like their legs and arms were all over the place.
No.
Yeah.
I know, it looked like a freaking like jackknife. Like I was like, I wish I was that flexible.
Yeah, I feel like there was a third person in under the sheets there with like their limbs just sticking out at random angles.
I feel the same way. I thought that was really interesting.
Also, his name was Chaz. That she was sleeping
I know!
Chaz.
I was like, oh no, it's such like a 90s name, Chaz. The only other Chaz I know is Chaz Bono, like Cher and Sonny Bono's son. So that's all it reminded me of. It's just like such a 90s name. Like Chad and Chaz are such a 90s name. But I just thought it was kind of hilarious how they had to like unplug the light bulb and the light bulb turned back on, and they had to unplug that light bulb and that light bulb turned back on.
That was probably the best prank I thought in the movie that like made me giggle.
It was giggle worthy.
It was giggle worthy.
It was a giggle and a half.
That's the thing about this movie. Some of the things I was like, oh, that's actually kind of funny, but then some of the things was like, maybe that was above my head.
So, just one of the thoughts that I had about this movie, and, you know, it's a slasher movie, sort of, ostensibly, but as we find out, you know, by the end of the movie, it's actually sort of more of a horror comedy, because there's no actual death. It's all faked, you know, everything is sort of an elaborate prank, you know, through Muffy's, obviously, crafting a murder mystery weekend so she can keep her inheritance. But one thing that I thought was interesting about it is, you know, despite the fact that obviously after the plot twist is revealed, you think of it more as a horror comedy, I mean, it really is still, unless you give away the twist, you have to think about it as a slasher movie, as a horror movie.
Yes.
And one of the things about it that I thought was really interesting, and that even when I was a teenager and I didn't really understand it because I couldn't relate to it, is that it does set itself apart in the tone of the movie, obviously, from a lot of other slasher and horror movies. But one of the other ways that it really differentiates itself from the pack is that instead of your typical kind of teenage characters who are just like, oh, like, I'm going to go to the cheerleading competition or whatever. You know, these are not just college students, but they're, like, college seniors, you know, and they've had all these experiences, and they bring all this, like, actual adult baggage. And what I find really interesting about it is that it's like a slasher movie where the whole time that they're on this island, and as we discussed earlier, you know, they are all very charismatic and they all interact with each other, and you get like this fair bit of character development, like where they're just having these conversations with each other, and it's all very adult, and you know, they're talking about like theater and literature and their futures, and you know, what you're gonna do, and your ambitions and things like that. And like the whole thing, instead of being about like you know, say for example, like in a lot of them, you know, it's like, oh, you know, they finally have sex for the first time and then they die or whatever. So it's about like this sort of like your physical body, you know, blooming or whatever. But like this is actually like a slasher movie about being on the precipice of like actual like social adulthood.
Adulthood.
And, yeah,
exactly.
and it's all about like they all have, especially like a couple of the characters like Rob and stuff, like they all have this anxiety, and it's this like tension about like the real terror for them is, what am I going to do? I don't know if I'm going to get into med school. I don't know if I'm going to be able to marry into this rich family. You know, like I don't know what's my inheritance going to be, or, you know, who am I going to sleep with? Or, you know what I mean? And it's just, to me, it was like the concerns that they had in it were so much more adult, even though it was still very young people, but they were like in their early 20s instead of in their teens. And I just thought that was really interesting. And like, maybe that's why this movie has appealed to me more throughout my life, because they're marginally more adult than most of the other characters in this type of movie, which is why, again, it's so different and it has such a different tone. because they're more mature, and they're having throughout the whole movie, they're having more mature conversations about like art and life and, you know, what they're gonna do.
I can see that, because for some reason a lot of horror movies tend to be like, they kind of cast their characters as like teenage, which I think is interesting, but also I'm like almost 30 and I don't really so much identify with teenage people anymore. But I totally agree. Like, his girlfriend's so excited because she thinks he's getting into med school, and he like doesn't really want to say that he didn't get into med school, which is, you know, it is what it is, but for the person it's kind of embarrassing. So it kind of has that like adult issues to it.
Like both of you said, like it covers kind of these ideas and topics and like not a large margin, but like just slightly more mature. The characters are coping with it, like you said, in a more mature way than like kind of like a stereotypical like Friday the 13th or something, where they're like a little younger and it's just like a little more like, we don't care about anything. We're just kind of, you know, like it's summer and it's a summer slasher. So,
but the really interesting thing about this, and I'm just thinking about it now, as anybody who's listened to this podcast since the beginning, I mean, there's always the joke that I'm the podcast pleb and blah, blah, blah. And like, Mike and Rowan are also obviously like more well-versed in horror movies than I am. And I'm kind of like, as we've said in the first episode, this is a podcast, kind of part of it is seeing my journey through horror movies. And I'm realizing a lot of horror movies are really just about human anxieties, about life.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
that's really what it's about.
There are a lot of, you know, like film theory books and articles and essays and ideas, essentially, that posit that every generation, the horror films of that generation are just a reflection of the anxieties. You know, like in the 80s, you had your kind of like neoconservative, like your Reaganism, and so you see a lot of and that's when the slasher thing sort of really gained a foothold. And you know, when you think about a lot of like kind of mainstream and like cheap shitty slashers and stuff, you think oh, you know, the ones who like have sex die, and the ones who do like social transgressions of any kind die. Yeah. And the final people are all, you know, they're like pure and everything. And that sort of speaks to this like sins of the father will be visited upon the son, and, you know, like if you transgress socially, you'll be punished for it. And, you know, that, and to me, like, it's a lot of these theorists say, you know, like the horror movies just mirror essentially, intentionally or not, and a lot of them I think are unintentionally, what's happening socially and culturally and politically. Yeah.
For sure. And I think at some point, like, yes, of course, there's a lot of like mainstream horror things, but I think some of the themes of horror are, you know, still remain stigmatized and still remain out of the mainstream. Like, I know this is a really random example, but my friend Kat from Newfoundland came to Toronto, and we got together today, and we went to this like gothic store, and it was like all gothic clothes and stuff, and like you could tell from being there that's like so much a stigmatized place. And I feel like horror kind of like still falls in line with that, but with being outside of like in some terms, yes, it's certainly mainstream, like some aspects are, but some aspects are like certainly outside of the mainstream. And without that, I think you can kind of have like some sort of creativity. And like I said, like Rowan and Mike are definitely like have seen a lot more horror than I have, but even through this course of like, you know, I know it's like 7 official episodes or whatever, but 12 episodes, I know that's not a lot, but I've kind of seen, like, I've actually like kind of really like grown to really love horror movie just because it does talk about these like social things. Like, it is actually like quite a social genre, and it talks about a lot of the anxieties we have socially in our generation, and it's actually like it's becoming one of my favorite genres, actually.
Oh, absolutely. And this is the thing. It's, you look at, like, film with a capital F and movies that, like, specifically and explicitly address, like, social and cultural and political issues, and they're all well and good, but horror is, to me, the best representation of, like, the repressed example of,
for sure,
you don't realize maybe that you're making a movie that addresses and attacks and deals with the anxieties of your age.
Our lives. Yeah. No, for sure. And, like,
it's a very Freudian phenomena, I think, It's just psychoanalytical.
No, and when you talk about how, like, we've all talked about how horror affected us at a young age, and I think I might be the only one out of the three that kind of, like, got away from horror. But really, when you guys talk about, I'm like, I wish I was still into it. Like, in where I grew up, in, like, just my age group, I guess, like, horror was never talked about, it was never a thing. But if it was, I feel like I would have been a lot more understood, because as growing up, I was, like, certainly, I tried to, like, fit in, of course. I'm, like, from a rural area, and when you're from that place, like, you try to be like everybody else, of course. But, like, I knew for sure, like, I didn't fit into that. And I feel like if horror was, like, more of a thing, or, like, just, like, different things in general, I guess, that outside the mainstream were more of a thing, I would have felt, like, much more in place, for sure. And, like, when I hear you guys talking about that, I'm like, oh, damn, like, I wish I had have, like, discovered this when I was younger, and not when I'm, like, almost 30, and not,
You heard it here first. It's Slay's podcast, converting people to horror.
No,
I feel like
I think it's really good.
I feel like what was his name? Like David in The Invitation. I'm like bringing people into the cult.
Yep.
Oh no, Rowan's gonna kill us now. No, but I just really like.
We haven't lit the lamp outside the house yet. So
yeah, not yet.
Everybody has this fucking red lamp. No, like, I just really like. And like we said in the first episode, and I never, like, obviously we say, oh, this is like, you guys are talking about this and I'm talking about it, and it's my journey through horror or whatever, and like that can seem really superficial, but really as I watch it, I'm like, I kind of like, I really do enjoy it, and I kind of like find myself in a way through watching it, because I'm like, these are anxieties that I have as well.
Well, it's more interesting for you to come at it from an adult perspective and be able to acknowledge that.
Yeah, for sure.
And I want to do a odd placement segue in that about enjoyment. I want to know the ending. I want to know, were you satisfied with the ending? What did you think of the end? What was your feeling as it was happening? And then after it happened, like, was it satisfying? Was it...
It was so unsatisfying for me.
Oh, I loved it.
Go ahead, Mike.
No, and again, I watched it when I was a youngster, and it was not very often in my viewing experience that you got a really twist ending like that. Like, I feel like since the horror resurgence of the 90s, twist endings were a lot more common and actually expected. But when I watched this, I was a youngster and I had not seen anything like that, and this was a twist ending that completely essentially changed the genre of the movie. It went from being a slasher movie to like a comedic thriller in a way.
For sure.
And it was just so novel to me that I really enjoyed it. And I just, to me, the shift like that, it's like switching the key in a song or something, like partway through it, it threw me for a loop, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. And again, you start off and you go, it starts off with pranks, it starts off with April Fool's, the title of it is April Fool's Day. So really, it's a twist that is in keeping with the rest of the movie, and they foreshadow it because the whole time people are playing pranks. So I found it very satisfying. To me, it was woven into the fabric of the movie.
And see, I found it unsatisfying because at the beginning of the movie, it was very concentrated on April Fool's pranks, and it was very, like, explicit about that. And then at the beginning of the movie, I was like, this whole movie is going to be about April Fool's. Like, it's all going to be April Fool's prank. And then I kind of, as the movie got on, I kind of got caught up on it. And I was like, what's wrong with Muffy? She's acting weird. Oh my God, there's people in the well. Like, I got kind of caught up in the whole story. And then at the end, when they're like, April Fools, I'm like, duh, of course it's fucking April Fools, duh. Like, why didn't I knew that at the beginning. And then I got so caught up in the story of it that I was like, oh my God, that picture in the office, and the girl saw the picture, and I bet that's like a twin, blah, blah, blah. And then it was Buffy, and there's Muffy and Buffy, and this whole thing. I got so caught up on it. And then at the end, it's like, bah, April Fools. I'm like, duh, of course. Like,
so what you're saying is you didn't find the ending satisfying because the fact that they used good writing to trick you into forgetting about it, which was exactly what they aimed to do. That you're angry at that. You're angry that you fell for the structure of the story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much,
I'm just putting that out there. I just wanted to check and make sure that you were angry that the screenplay was interestingly structured.
Did what it wanted to do, right?
Okay.
Exactly. It did exactly what it wanted to do. And at the beginning, I was like, yeah, this is a fucking April Fool's prank, because everything, the chairs are falling over, the fucking lights won't go off, all this stuff. It's obvious. And everyone's like, April Fools. And I'm like, I hate April. I just, like, as a human being, hate April Fool's Day. And I'm like, oh,
the disdain of April Fool's.
Yeah, I'm just like, April Fool's Day.
See, and I had this weird thing, like, where, because when it happened, I was like, I don't really know if I enjoyed it. I was just like, this is like really awkward, and like
it was awkward.
And like I said when we first started talking about the movie, like I was just like everything's just like so awkward about it. But then like the more I thought about it, I was like, it kind of like it gives it like that uniqueness, because it's like such a weird film, and it's just like, it's so bizarre, and the ending's bizarre.
It's so bizarre.
So, and like, especially like you get the very end where like the Jack in the Box thing like winks at you.
But that also comes up in the beginning. It's like a carry through the whole movie.
With the rat, yeah.
With the Jack in the Box.
Yeah, like, so I don't know. I asked you guys, and I feel like I don't really know.
I don't know. I feel like I haven't really processed my feelings on this movie, to be honest. I just thought it was like such... Also, one spectrum, it was like completely what I expected, but then not in another spectrum, it was completely not what I expected.
Yeah,
that doesn't really make sense, but that's like how I felt about this movie.
Well, I think this would be an appropriate time to rate it, because I'm very interested.
I will give it, of course, I will give it a yay. I mean, it's not a slay. I've loved it since I was a youngster, but again, I realize that it's a flawed movie, but again, it played with the notions of being self-aware and injecting humor into the horror and plot twists and stuff, like, at least 10 years before any of those other, like, 90s resurgent horror movies did. So I think it just deserves some credit for that. And again, the writing was great. The actors were all so like charismatic and interesting and memorable. So to me, it's a total yay.
Go ahead, Rowan. I always have to go second. You
go
second.
I will go second now. This is tough. So I'm gonna give it a nay, but I'll give it like a nay plus.
Oh, damn you!
I'll give it a nay plus, because I don't regret watching it. I'm glad I watched it. And I even feel like I would watch it again like, I feel like this is a great, like, having drinks with a group of friends.
It's a slumber party movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
Like, so I respect it in that, but, like, I was kind of thinking it in a way of, like, would this necessarily be something I'd, like, outright recommend to someone that didn't bring it up? And then I was just kind of like, I don't think it's like a must-see, and I don't necessarily think like you ever really have to see it if you don't want to, But yeah, I'll go with an A+.
Ah, damn you!
Well, you can go with that too.
Okay. Mike, I love you like you're my brother. For real. I do. I'm the same way. I'm an A+. It's like, I feel like, and we've had this, we've like spoken about this before, and you've spoken about this in terms of you and Rowan. Like, you have this nostalgic attachment to certain movies, which, like, that has its own power, right? As someone coming into the movie and seeing it for the first time at 29 and a half years old, I feel
Bitch, you
like
30.
I'm not 30 yet. November 22nd. Okay, so I mean, it was a funny movie in the way that it was like, oh, I'm Mary O'Shea O'Toole O'Neill, fucking Riley O'Toole O'Shea, whatever. It was a funny movie, and it was like actually pretty comical in the ways, and especially at the end. But I don't know, there was something about it that really caught me off guard, and like we've addressed before, and nobody else cares. But I'm a fucking nerd. I'm all about the logic of the movies. And I was like, what is the logic? There's so many parts where I was like, what is the logic here? I don't get it. I know I'm such a wet blanket in that respect. Like I said, there was a part where I was like, I knew this was going to be a goddamn April Fool's joke the whole time. And I did get sucked into the movie. I thought, oh, damn it. That picture is Buffy. I bet it's fucking Buffy and Muffy, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. I like very firmly, ever since I saw this movie, I thought also it would be an A+. It's not like, if you ever see horror, you don't necessarily have to see this movie. But if you want, like, you know, if you got a day off, if you got a Sunday off, and you want a little joke mixed with a horror movie, watch this movie.
Legit.
So with having our reviews, I think it's only appropriate to go into everyone's favorite time, which is the budget game.
Oh no. Mike, you're so much better at this than I am. I'm the worst.
So
I like hack judged the last time, and I won.
So we'll start off with the cost. How much do we think it costs to make?
$2 million.
I'll say I will be more generous than I was last time and say like 7 or 8 million.
Okay, last time you said 50, so I thought you were going to say 70 or $8 million.
So you said 7 million, Mike?
Yes.
You're probably gonna win. You always win.
Not by much, but Mike is closer to the number.
Course.
It is $5 million.
Okay, and by the way, I did not see that when I looked at the plot keywords on IMDb. I could have cheated and like looked at it, but I specifically didn't.
I'm very proud of you.
Yeah,
so let's talk about what it made. What do you think it made?
So how much did it... Sorry, how much
So you said it was
$5 million.
$5 million, okay.
$5 million to me.
I feel like it made it back, so probably like... Maybe it did make $7 or $8 million?
Now, I have no comprehension of how much a horror movie would make back in the day. Because you know what? I'm really thinking about my parents when they're 20 years old and what they're going to go see at the theater.
Well, then use that and make an educated guess.
I know. I'm really trying to think. Maybe it made $10 million.
So Exilia is going to win this
what?
one.
Well done.
Yes.
It made $12.9 million.
Nice.
That's a solid return on investment.
So
I'm just like trying to picture this showing at the Paramount Theater in Kempville, Nova Scotia. $1 per matinee. Them showing, they only have one fucking theater to show, and they're showing this movie. What was it called? What was it called again? April Fool's Day.
Yes, I'm sure
And I'm really
Kempville, Nova Scotia is the
I don't think that was the market.
prime market.
Prime
sample,
demographics for this movie. It definitely came to the Mount Pearl Theater.
Definitely.
For our target audience.
Yeah.
So I only pulled a couple like facts, and they're kind of, I guess, different facts than what we normally do, because this has like a very rich,
Rowan said it had a lot of stuff written about it.
A lot of stuff written about it, as well as a lot of connecting factors to things. So we'll start off with what Mike had brought up earlier, where he thought it was shot in Vancouver.
Was it? Did you say that?
Yeah.
Yes, it was definitely a Canadian, like, I figured it was probably BC somewhere.
For sure.
Yeah.
BC, that's like a hot spot for movies.
It's an all-American cast, but it was shot in Vancouver.
You know, that makes sense, because the place is really... I know I said it looks like Thailand, but honestly, I've seen pictures of Vancouver, and it looks like that.
Yes, Thailand, Vancouver, same thing.
Whatever, same thing.
Some alternate titles. So, in French... This movie is called Weekend of Terror in French.
How the fuck? Oh, you mean in French, or it's not called Weekend of Terror?
No, like in whatever in French. Because I'm assuming April Fool's Day doesn't necessarily translate to different cultures.
Yeah. That's very English.
And in Germany, it's called The Horror Party.
The Horror Party.
The Horror Party.
Interesting.
So there is an alternate version of this that has only ever been... released in Sweden.
Shout out to Sweden.
Because the Swedish version, they weren't allowed to have any violence in it. So they had to cut out anything that resembled violence.
Is this a common thing in Sweden?
I'm not sure. Back then, at the time it was released. So apparently it's a very bizarre cut because you don't see what, like, people disappearing. They just disappear from the movie and they're not in the movie anymore.
They don't show them get killed or anything.
So there's no context to why people just start missing from the plot.
I feel like they would totally not understand this movie.
There's also alternative ending that was shot but never released, that had a more elaborate thing at the end. Of course they did. Originally they had thought about she was gonna be, like, have escaped from an asylum and was crazy.
Yeah, but the whole thing, when they get that note in the boat and they're like, Miss St. John, and I'm like, it's fucking definitely not that one. That's definitely not Muffy, because they didn't say Muffy St. John. It's definitely a twin.
The only reason they didn't use it was because Paramount is who paid for this. They thought that was too down. It left the audience too down, and they wanted kind of an upbeat, happy ending, because they said that's what people want. So that's why they changed it to that. So this is directed by Fred Walton. So Fred Walton is famous for When a Stranger Calls.
Classic.
We never know. Maybe we'll review it sometime.
Absolutely.
So it's written by Danilo Bach, I believe is his name. And he wrote all of the Beverly Hill Cops movies.
What? That's so random.
So the last two are very horror connected. So it's edited by Bruce Green. Bruce Green edited Friday the 13th 5 and 6. And also randomly edited Cool Runnings.
Oh my god, Cool Runnings was filmed in Calgary. They still have the fucking bobsled track that they use for Cool Runnings in the Calgary Olympic area. They still have that. And I'm pretty sure when I lived there, people were like, yeah, that's where they filmed Cool Runnings. And I'm like, great, like, that's cool, like, awesome. Man, didn't that movie come out in fucking 1990? I saw that on CBC on fucking Wonderful World of Disney on Sunday evening.
It's a very Canadian thing. And the one thing I wanted to bring up was the music, because we didn't talk about...
I like the music.
The music is very well done. I really liked it.
That.
So the music is done by Charles Bernstein, who also did the music for A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, yep, love it.
Cujo and Rumpelstiltskin, that great 90s classic.
I've never seen that. I've only seen several plays of Rumpelstiltskin.
It's the Leprechaun, but Rumpelstiltskin.
Is Cujo like with a dog?
Yeah, it's based off Stephen King.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
And that's really all the facts that I had for this that I thought were interesting. The connections, that there was a lot of people that worked on this movie that were connected to these iconic franchises like Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th.
It's really unfortunate when people generally think of movies, they think of obviously the actors and actresses and the director, but there's actually a lot more to the movie than that, and these people have worked on really like iconic movies.
Yeah, so giving those people credit.
Yeah, for sure, and they really don't ever get credit. Maybe on our podcast, we're like, I love the music, I love the cinematography, but other than our podcast, I don't feel like they ever.
You can only get credit in our podcast. Check it out.
But no, I thought this movie is like a very interesting pick.
Now I have to do all the, pay the bills. And by pay the bills, I mean just do plugs that I pay myself, I guess. We do want to make sure that you're following us on all our social media.
Hey, what? That's like give you any money.
It was a bad segue. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, It Slays Podcast. Write us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and we'll respond back.
I always feel so sad because I read a question on Instagram and like a bunch of people like it, but they never write a response. I'm so sad. Engage with us.
Write a response so Exilia has someone to talk to.
I know. I need someone to talk to, guys.
And I also wanted to plug Exilia's kind
blog
of bait. No, not the blog.
Oh, okay.
Because we don't have anything on the blog yet, Exilia.
Guys, I'm really, like I said, I'm still processing my trip to Detroit.
And I feel like Exilia could write a good blog about her liking of horror now, and
I mean, It Follows is the number one priority of the blog right now. Like, for real, I'm not even kidding. I'm still processing Detroit and just my experience there.
What I was going to plug, another one of Exilia's babies, is our Spotify playlist.
Mike, you gotta tell me more songs to put on there, because I might have 12.
So, It Slays Podcast, we have a playlist. I think it's just called
It Slays Horrifying Podcast, maybe?
I believe. We have ads for it on our social media.
I'll tell you for sure.
Exilia will look it up while I plug. So, yeah.
We're so super
go
serious.
to Spotify. We have a playlist where we just pick songs associated with horror or from horror movies or score and just things that we thoroughly enjoy.
Okay, guys, if you want to look this up on Spotify, it's called It Slays Podcast Horrific Playlist. We officially have about 15 songs on there. If you have a great idea, and I'm sure Mike does because I haven't asked him yet, you might have some more great songs I can put on there. It is a ever-evolving playlist. I am a human being, and I might not be perfect. So, I might have only picked 10 songs. If you like other songs, please let us know, and we will put it on our playlist.
And our last bit of news is the bonus pick has been chosen by the fans.
Woo! Mike versus Evil Mike.
Mike versus Evil Mike. And Evil Mike won.
Evil Mike won.
Evil
Guess
Mike
what?
did win.
Plot
I'm really surprised.
Plot twist. They're both Evil Mike.
They're both. Oh, yeah.
So, Mike, do you want to announce what won?
It would be my pleasure. The winner was, drumroll, Witchboard 2, The Devil's Doorway.
Ooh.
I've never seen this.
I'm really intrigued to see this.
It has an amazing poster.
Pretty random. It does have great, and I'm pretty sure this went straight to video. The artwork is great. And I'm not gonna lie, if I can find, I feel like it might be like up in full on YouTube or something. So if I can find a link to it, I will post it on our page just so that anybody who may actually be listening, if they want to watch it without, going, out of their way to find it, because it's kind of hard to find.
Getting viruses on their computers.
You're not gonna go.
I have to double check because I think it might be on the Tubi app.
It might be. I have Tubi. Well. I haven't checked, but either way, if it's available for free and readily, without having to do too much work, I'll post a link to it. So, whatever, anybody that wants to watch it can. Why not?
And with that, as always, thank you for listening to us drunkards rant. The Boozers Club is officially in session. As always, I am Rowan.
Bye, Cecilia.
And this is Mike.